Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Dyer, and I wanted to do this call tonight to introduce you guys to the idea of these stories that we tell ourselves and the effects that it have, or, that they have on our lives, and what that does for us, how they're created, how we buy into them, how they begin to shape our lives, and whether or not we can tell if these things are contributing to our lives or not. This is all coming from a space where I was after I created and put out my book called Follow Your Bliss, A Guide to a Powerful Mindset. And in that book, I have a whole lot, a lot of questions to kind of break up the stories that we've been living in and kind of shift the way we're looking at them to see, what it might look like if we just kind of tilted a little bit or whatever, and see if that shook anything loose. And what it shook loose for me was just this whole idea of all the stories that are there, the layer upon layers of stories that we just kind of build. And it occurred to me today when I was thinking about it that these stories are basically the definitions of everything that we have. I mean, if you wanted to look at everything from down to a quantum level, science has looked at it and seen it really all the way down there at basically ground zero of what we can see is really nothing. So our definitions are creating all of this stuff by just the fact that we observe it and go, okay, that's a tree, or that's Susie, or whatever it is. It's we're creating these stories, we're creating these definitions as we go on. We are the creators. The funny thing is we're kind of rolling along more as passengers, kind of letting it happen instead of going, wait, I get to create this stuff. So if we kind of look back at this whole thing and think about, these stories that we tell ourselves, and think about the origins of these stories, where do they come from? We've been surrounded by and absorbing and buying into these stories basically since birth. Our parents start giving us stories of, who we are, where we live, what we're going to do that day, what we're going to eat, all this other stuff we grew up with. We take on the stories of our parents, what they were experiencing, how they see life, how they want to do life. They pass it on to us because, well, they think they know what they're doing best, which is true. I mean, they're just trying to do the best for us, set us up for success as we go along. And so we have those stories. Some of those stories are really, really good, and they help set us up to have great success in life. Some of them, as you can probably imagine, take away from the stories that were probably coming from ourselves. And those stories that what it is that we would like to do, the things that are coming from our heart, coming through us, coming out of our heart and saying, hey, this is my bliss. This is the thing that I can't not do. Well, Johnny, guess what? That's not what you're going to do. You're going to be a lawyer. And what does that do for us? I mean, and we've got those things all the way from the grandest of things down to the littlest ones of, how we basically think about what's in front of us, all the way up to, our life stories, what it is that we're going to do. The thing that I have found so interesting in all of these hundreds and hundreds of clients that I've trained over the years in the gym is this interesting juxtaposition of the stories that everybody was squeezing down as hard as they could, as far away as they could, because they were either afraid of the judgment that was going to happen because they let it out and were living it, or they were just so squeezed down because of what was conditioned into them that those stories basically didn't exist anymore. They were so far down there and creating just really interesting energy shifts in the people that I was seeing. And the funny thing that I got to, I was like, I can do everything I can here as a trainer, teach these people how to work out, how to lift weights, how to, get on a schedule with all this stuff, how to, address their food and whatnot. And I found that it was limited success because we weren't dealing with the underlying things that were going on, which is these stories that we were either living that aren't ours, or the stories that needed to come birthing through us that we were afraid to because of judgment or whatever else it was. And what was that telling our bodies, and how is that now creating our experiences here? Our experiences with our lives, the things that we attract to us, the people that are attracted to us. Then how do we create with them? And we go on and on through our lives. Our siblings add to these stories. Our school, our teacher, our coaches add to these stories. Society has its own stories that it tells, and then we get to the space where we have boyfriends and girlfriends and spouses and this and that, and they have expectations and stories that add to this whole thing. I got to read this really cool book. It's about 6 or 8 months ago. It was written by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's called The Four Agreements. And if you haven't read that one, which I think I've talked to you guys about that, I highly recommend it. He goes on and talks about these things as domestications, these stories that we've got going on. And it's a way to get us to fit in, which I think is at the core of all of this stuff. We want to fit in. We want to be one of the cool kids. So what do? We look at everybody else and go, well, that's what they're doing. I need to be cool, so I need to fit in and do that. I don't need to do this thing that's coming from my heart, because that's not what they're doing. That's not their choice. If I do this, if I do what's coming out of my heart, if I follow my bliss, nobody's going to be around. They're not going to like me because it's not what they're doing. I mean, how many of us have done those things all along through life? I know I have. I can tell you guys a story, and I know you've heard this one. It was a really more of a profound lesson in this later on in my life when I look back on what had happened. But I'm a musician. I've played drums since I was about 12 years old. I started on piano when I was somewhere around 8, and maybe 9 or something like that. But the moment that I saw the band Kiss when I was about 8 years old, that was it. I was sold. I was hooked. I was going to be a musician, rock musician. That was it. And charging forward, I did. I went into that. And about the time I was 18-ish, somewhere in there, ready to just kind of jump in full force and just chase that and get that. I couldn't see anything else. All I saw was myself being the rock musician. I got this neat little story that crept in. And it was, from my parents and from other people that were really wishing well of me, wanting me to be succeed in life. And they told me, hey, Greg, why don't you go back to school and get something to fall back on, just in case that music thing doesn't work out. And what I see now, as much effort, as much fun, as much time as I put into becoming a musician, I always still had that, well, I can fall back on this because I've got that. And it was enough doubt that what I think I saw is that I didn't quite get all the way there because I never really fully believed anymore that I could get there. I bought into that story of, yeah, no, that's not what I'm going to do. Because somebody of authority told me that it's highly unlikely that I'll reach that. And I know they meant well. I know they did. But nevertheless, that's what I saw. When I look back on that now, the lesson that taught me, and the way I look at things now, and the way I look at the things that I've been able to succeed at, the stories, the things that I succeed at are the ones that I have no doubt that I just jump into. They're mine, and I've been able to not be affected by anybody else's stories, how they come in and tell me, oh, you shouldn't do that, or this isn't going to work, or oh, that's not the right thing, or whatever. You're going to be made fun of. And so I thought maybe I would create these classes around this idea and start talking about this. And how do we go about, first of all, recognizing these stories that are going on? Because I think a lot of us, these are running on autopilot for us. When you look at these things, I mean, we just get up every day, we brush our teeth, we make our beds, we get our clothes on, take a shower before that or whatever. The routines that we go through, we go downstairs, maybe we eat breakfast, maybe not. Maybe we just jump in the car, head to work, grab something on the way to work, whatever. I mean, these stories that we have that just, when we start them, they seem like it's okay. And then the next day, they seem like it's okay. And then a couple years from then, it's like, wow, I'm still doing the same thing. And then we find ourselves in these grooves and these ruts, really, these stories that are just not allowing us to advance forward, maybe not allowing us to really fully hear what it is that may be coming next. Or maybe we get so ingrained in that pattern, in those stories, that we're just afraid to jump. We're afraid to go into something that might be uncomfortable, that might take us out of this familiarity that we have created around us. So what do? We just kind of keep plugging along, stay on autopilot. Well, I don't know about you guys. I'm kind of tired of autopilot. So I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about some of the things that kind of pop into the space in our relationships with ourselves, in our relationships with others, their relationships with us, and the conclusions that we come to about that, the expectations, whether they be your expectations, somebody else's expectations, or imaginary expectations. Those are kind of the ones that we think that somebody else might have for us because that's what we think we need to do in order to fit in. Classic examples are like when we are creating a relationship with somebody and you're sitting there looking at them going, wow, I really like to be with this person, but if I'm like this, they're going to think I'm way too weird. I need to not do that. And so we have this imaginary expectation built in there, that we put upon ourselves. It's an interesting one because what I see happening then is somewhere down the road, that behavior's got to come out because that's part of who you are. So now this other person's created this relationship with you based upon that story, which isn't even your story. This is why I think that when we start looking at these things and address them, it gets fun, it gets interesting, it gets powerful when we're capable of stepping into the space where we realize we have the control over these stories because we're the ones that are writing it. What do you guys think? Anybody got anything they want to share? Hi, Ellie.
You can see me?
I can.
I had trouble getting on here. It's like, oh, they can't see me coming in. Oh, man. Shoot. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
It's good. So we've got Susie and Becky and Patty.
Oh,
This
is that
Ellie.
who else is on? I can't see. Oh, okay. Is that who else is on? Okay, I got in halfway. I got in part of your story, so I'm going to jump in here, kind of tell you a brief little story about how you were saying about how, I guess, what people expect us to be, and we're probably not really ourselves, but especially this comes back from being like in high school and junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
I've been fortunate. I've grown up in very nice areas and went to really good schools, and looking back on it, I was a cheerleader in high school, and it was sort of an unwilling cheerleader in high school. I know this is kind of a weird thing to put it in, but it's more like the friends that I so-called had when we were going to school at that age. You kind of think that's your world and that's how you're supposed to be, and you act a certain way. And I look back on it and I think, why did I go that route? Why was I a cheerleader? Why was I this? But it's, my so-called friends who I don't even see anymore now, that when I think about it, because you grow up, you go to college, you go past that, and you go your separate ways, and everybody changes. And I look back on it and I'm thinking, wow, I never really had anything common with these girls that I went to high school and cheer, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking, why did I do certain things? And when people ask me, what did you do in high school? Just they want to find out your personality and everything. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking, wow, is that really me? Because all the years that you go by, and you go through so much, and now at this point in your life, you look back on it and you're like, wow, I'm a totally different person than I was back then. So, I mean, now as an adult, it's easy to say, yeah, be yourself. You don't have to put on, a certain thing to fit in, because it's adolescence, I think. You can't help but want to fit in. But if it was me now, like, especially after I left high school, went to college, and you kind of do your own thing, that's when I think you realize who you really are. And so the person I am now, with all the people that I've met through the years, now you have that choice whether or not to be, who you really are, I guess is how you're putting it. And now I feel so comfortable with myself now that as soon as I talk, I don't have to feel like, oh, what you're looking at them thinking, what's their reaction? Or it's more like I just run my mouth. So it's kind of like, take me as I am. And if they don't run away, I figure, hey, I'm doing good, but if they're still there, you think, hey, wow, this is pretty cool. And then you start that connection. I think now is the people that you consider friends are the real friends now, as later on, as an adult, rather than those years, you always hear about high school reunions and all family reunions, and maybe family's a different thing because it's family, but when it's a like high school reunion, you go back and again, it's all like a fake atmosphere, like, oh yeah, and pretending like, oh yeah, we knew each other and we were friends. And I'm thinking, wow, I really feel that wasn't me. So now I feel I love my life. It's kind of like be your own thing and be happy with whoever you are, without, of course, offending anybody or insulting anybody, but just be yourself, and it's the best way to be,
When you made the choice to be a cheerleader, was that something that you wanted to do?
No. And this is going to sound weird, like you're laughing, but everyone thinks that, and that's a good point, because everyone thinks, okay, that sounds so ideal. We all want to be a cheerleader. We all want to be the head football guy, quarterback, and the star, the hero of the school. Okay, maybe you didn't, but in my school, that was kind of that thing. And it's like, it depends on where you went, right? And that was at my school. So I felt like something was wrong with me because I didn't want to go that route. But my friend was the one that was into it, and I was a filler in because you got to try it with groups of 4 people and you got to go in. So I was like this unwilling person just to fill in, and it was ironic that I turned out that I made it and she didn't make it. So that didn't help our friendship any. But I think I lost her as a friend that day. But so see, again, you learn about people. But I think at that point, like I said, I went through it because I thought that was what was expected of me to, make my friend happy, to be happy, but I wasn't happy. It was just the whole, the fake atmosphere of it all. And I didn't realize until now, looking back on it. So now it's like, now when I bring it up, I can laugh it off, but back then it seemed important, but now it doesn't. And as an adult, again, you make your choices of who you want to represent yourself to the world, right? And to me, this is who I am. Like I said, take me as I am, and without offending anybody, but if you don't like me, I'm sorry about that, but I like who I am, So yeah, I agree with you.
It's not really our responsibility to worry about offending other people. It's the individual's responsibility to be offended. And that's a different place to get to when you start thinking about that. And you can start with that on your own. And that's, once again, that's a story. You can buy into being the victim and being offended by everything that's going on, or the things that people say or do or whatever. And it's just, that's fine. But is that really contributing to your life? Is it helping you move forward? 'Cause, I think about. All right, I'm not going to go very deep into this because I don't really want to, but I think about the present political climate and how many people are offended by what's going on right now, and it's interesting to me just how much. That doesn't seem to be contributing to people having a good time or the bliss or whatever. It just seems like it's derailing everybody's own story in order to buy into the idea that, well, we need to just talk about how bad things are right now. And I'm wondering about that. What is it that's so necessary for us to have to jump into this need to be offended by things that are going on? And I know some people, that is their gig. They need to, get out and be socially active and politically active and try to change that landscape and all that. But for the majority of the people, I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they're just jumping on and just wanting to be offended because, I don't know. I'm like, wow, it's so much easier to look at it and go, you know what? It's my choice whether I want to be offended by what's going on. Patty, you look like you got something.
Hey, Patty. Hey, girl.
Well, one of the things that I think is going on with the political climate is that when we think, or at least I know, when I think of America, I think of it as the melting pot, the land of the free, I welcome diversity and have marched and fought for human rights and, my whole life. And when I see something that's eroding, that has such great potential to erode basic human rights for certain sects of our population, it just infuriates me. It's like, we're going backwards. And I don't want the rest of the world to think of America as a racist society or full of a bunch of bigots and that type of thing, because I'm an American and I identify with being an American. And I think that's where that comes from for me. You know, but I have a long history of activism. Like when you talked about your teenage years, I had just a couple of close friends, but I was friends with everybody. But I was very different. I have always kind of gone to the beat of my own drum. I get very passionate about things. So, you know, when I was young, I was chaining myself to nuclear power plant fences and
Wow. Wow, Patty.
And
oh my gosh.
A lot of the kids were like, oh my gosh, you know, would you just, I can't wait till you move out of Nebraska and all this stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Now they're like, oh, Patty, at least you stood up for things. You know, now they're like, wow, you've always been the same and that's really great. And you're still idealistic and you still fight for rights. And, you know, that's awesome. You know, I wish I had the guts to do that. And it's like, well, you would if you really wanted to do that. You know, you don't, so that's okay too.
And that's just it. That speaks to that. What I was getting to there is that, you know, some people, this is the choice. That's your bliss, Patty. That's the thing that you can't not do.
Yeah.
Exactly. The thing that I find really interesting though is the people that's all they do is they just sit and complain and complain and complain and complain and feel some oppression or whatever that's not really there. We're not oppressed. There's nothing going on. I mean, our lives are not changing. Other than the normal change that's always happening, but it's just, it's just, but my point, I mean, it's not, you know, you got to step back and look at it. All right, what's going on up there? Is this really affecting me right now? Is it really something that I need to worry about to pull me out of what it is I'm here to do? And that's just it, Patty. I mean, I know that's part of what you're here to do.
Exactly.
But you've actually gone out and taken action with that.
Yes.
And that's a
and
different
I continue
step.
to.
Yeah. I think that's a different step. If we're just going to sit and huddle in the corner and, oh my God, it's just going to go to hell and it just does so bad. Yeah. And I'm not, you know, all I'm going to do is just sit here and complain. No. Come on.
No, I have very little tolerance for that.
Anyway, so that's another that. Anyway, Tammy, you joined us. I see your iPhone. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm also trying to clean.
Oh my goodness. Oh, she left.
Like, wow, there's Tammy. Becky, I don't know, you look like you might have had something a minute ago.
Oh. Nothing. No. Nothing.
Okay. Susie, I don't want to leave you out either, Susie.
Come on.
Hey, Patty, go girl.
So, you know,
well, can I say, I liked what Ellie had to say about, you know, back in the teen years and really feeling more comfortable with being your authentic self. And so, that's what it sounds like to me that you were saying. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, but as far as, you know, I think the first thing that we need to do is become aware of our stories. I mean, if we're operating in that autopilot that you were talking about, Greg, I mean, if we're not aware of the stories that's behind the behaviors that we're thinking and believing, and programmed really into us, then we can't do anything about it. So first, being aware of that there are the stories that are causing limiting situations.
I did want to address something that you said, Ellie, you know, in that, when we were teenagers, we kind of follow the pack or whatever a lot of times just because we want to fit in, and it feels like it's a lot more difficult for us to step outside of that because we see those kids that do, and wow, they are made fun of and they're picked on and they're called names and all this other stuff. And wow, I really don't want to be part of that. So I'm just going to do this. So I'm going to go play football because that's what the cool guys do. I didn't do that, by the way. I just football.
Yeah, I can tell, Greg. You're very individual. I like that. I like that about you.
It wasn't that I didn't like football. I really did. And I would play pickup games and stuff like that. But, I had things that I preferred running track, so I did that. And I skied and all those things. But what I wanted to, what you struck on there was really interesting is that we've got adults that, we've got people that are at the space where, and I know I've done this too, where we're choosing to do something to go along with the crowd that isn't really ours. We're still doing the same thing, Ellie. We're choosing to be the cheerleader even though we don't want to be the cheerleader.
That's true.
That's
true.
And that's the space where, what Becky said there, are you really aware of the stories that are running the show, that you do have the choice to shift. And that's at the core of this whole thing, you guys. And, right here, halfway into this whole thing, I'm going to just unveil it all. We can hang up right now after this. And it goes like this. You always have choice. And when you think you don't have choice, that's a choice. You've got choice always. And the fun part about this is, I was saying that all along, and then people will come to me and say, well, what about these people that are imprisoned and all that other, and they're oppressed with, in an oppressive government and all this other stuff, they don't have choice. Well, I started reading about this guy named Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he was a Holocaust survivor. He's written several books, but one of them that, I think it's on the way to my house, so hopefully I'll get to read it. I've read these stories via Wayne Dyer, who's one of my favorites, and Wayne talked about Victor several times, but he relayed the story about of Victor and what had happened when he was in several of the different concentration camps during the Holocaust. His perspective on the whole thing, it was how he chose to look at life that got him through. He found something of beauty to look at every day, to hold on to see, to get through all that. He was watching his friends and family die all around him because they gave up. He chose not to give up. He chose to shift the way that he saw things, to change his perspective. And when I heard that story, I realized that there's one thing that we cannot imprison ever, and that's the way you choose to see things. Nobody can ever take that away from you. And that's the basis of the stories that you're going to create. When you get to that space where you realize, I can just change my perspective.
Isn't that something we do every morning?
Change our perspective?
Wake up and choose to have a certain perspective, or if we're feeling upset about something or something is going on, we change our perspective so that we can get through it and make it better and move forward.
Is that something you think that everybody always does all the time, or do we find ourselves stuck in the stories and never shifting it and getting to the place where all of a sudden you feel like you're stuck? You're a victim of whatever.
Well, I'm very, very fortunate is in that I have friends like you who, if they find me getting stuck in a story, they knock me right off my chair. And I appreciate it.
That speaks to the story of the relationships.
Oh my gosh.
But I know what you're saying. There's a lot of people who don't surround themselves with other people who will help lift them up when they have a down moment and remind them that, I have friends who constantly remind me, oh, Patty, get over it.
Well, the interesting part of that too is that is their story. That is their perspective of what they see for you. Mm-hmm. And that's a choice for us to buy into that as well too. What was I talking to? I was talking to somebody about this today, and it was slipped my mind. Anyway, it was along those lines of just that, of just how It's gone. Never mind.
Greg, oh my God.
To be continued.
Oh
So,
boy.
I thought I was going to have it. It was pretty cool too. Oh my goodness.
Oh
Too bad you guys weren't
man.
in my head. So, okay, so we
Tell it
covered,
next time.
say that again?
You gotta
Ellie,
tell it next time.
Maybe I
You,
will.
you gotta tell your story next time.
Maybe I will. So,
Okay.
so we talked about the whole idea of wanting to fit in and all that stuff, and but I didn't get to this point where I probably haven't talked much about this either. So we create these stories basically based upon our thoughts in our head, right? These thoughts, the perspectives that we have, and we take everything in, and then we create the idea of what it is, and then sometimes we spit it back out, and sometimes we use that to create how we're going to do things in our life, because this is our individual way we interpret the world, how we bring in things. It creates those thoughts. And I want you guys to think for a minute here. Of the thoughts that are in your head right now, how many of them are yours? How many of them belong to you?
Patty. Patty looks really confused.
I love Patty's like, that was awesome.
Oh my
What
God.
do you mean? Oh, mine, they're in my head.
Greg, I think I know what you mean. I think I know what you mean, because like the stories that originate from our own thoughts versus ones that have been, given to us in one way or another throughout life. The voices we hear.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that inside your head there are ever any original thoughts?
Ooh, good
I would
question.
like
Oh
to.
man. I hope so.
That's a
Patty's
good
got
one.
original thoughts.
I hope so. Oh my
And
God.
you know what? I
that's-
believe that Ellie probably has too.
That's scary. That's scary.
My mother tried really hard to get them all out of my head.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I have a feeling Patty's got like hundreds of them in there. Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
When you think about this, we're creating our lives based upon thoughts that never originated from us in the first place. We've just chosen them and decided to wear them. It's like, walking into somebody else's closet. Hey, you know what that looks like? I think I'll wear those clothes. You can ask yourself your questions on these thoughts. Do they fit me or don't they fit me? Is following through with these thoughts going to be something that's going to move me forward and be a contribution to my life? Or is following through this thought kind of holding me back or detracting from, what it is that I'm here to do? To get away from the idea of how, of whether or not we are actually having original thoughts. Because as I say this, as I talk about this a little bit more, and like I said, I don't know that I've really explored all of this before. I've talked about the idea that was presented to me that about 98% of the thoughts in our head really don't belong to us, or somewhere along those lines. We just pick them up from everywhere else, whether or not we're hearing them or seeing them, or they're just because we're psychic antenna, we're picking up everybody else's thoughts from all over the place. It's like any of the other stories. We get a chance to choose whether or not we want to live them, and that's just it. I mean, do you want to follow through with that thought?
And the criteria for that would be what? Like looking at, okay, is this serving me to continue to have this story that I continue to then play out in my life? Is this serving me? Being aware of that, and if it's not, changing the story.
If you wanted to look at it from the point of view of, okay, if this thought that I have here, following through with this, what is this going to lead to in 2 years, in 5 years? What am I going to create with this if I do this? Where will I be down the road? And see what kind of awareness has come to you. What will this create for me tomorrow? What will this create for me in a year? What will this create for me in 10 years if I follow through with this? And I don't know that we all stop to think these things on all our thoughts that we got going on in our heads, and I'm not suggesting that we do, but there are those moments that are going to be like, wow, wait a minute. Should I run this red light or not? That kind of thing.
Oh my goodness.
What's this
Greg!
going to create for me in a minute?
Greg! Oh my gosh. You're supposed to be a positive role model.
I know they're not all like that, but you know, it's just like one of those things where you're thinking about those stories. I mean, you know, they can be very impactful moments where they're going to run into us and they're going to be like, wow, you know, if I choose this can create something quite dynamic for me, or it could create something that, man, that might take a little while to get out of that hole. If I say that to that person because it's in my head, what's that going to create now with this relationship with this person?
Well, I think that's why sometimes it is to be socially acceptable, and on one hand, and on another hand, to not just go up and say something to someone who you know it's going to hurt them or offend them. Sometimes we just keep those things to ourselves until it becomes important to change that relationship or that scenario and say, okay, I've got to say this. I've got to say this.
When it gets to a place where it's impeding on your life, you know, you have that choice. I mean, you can be kind and just say, you know what? I think above all else, I mean, just be kind. And I think you guys have been around me enough to know that's what I'm about. You know, I tend to not choose things that, you know, that it's easy, I think, for us to choose that story, to be kind. And I believe that is at the core of all of us, is that kindness, that spirit of generosity, and that unconditional love. I think that's the core of everything. That's the core story.
Okay.
You buy into all the other stuff, and we create from that because of, I don't know.
This might be a good time to interject a nice round of kumbaya.
Come on, Patty, you sang it before.
Oh my God. All right, Patty, let's hear you.
Come on, Patty. No, you sang it before.
We need a campfire, sorry.
Oh my God.
But you know, that's true. I think that, but that's another perspective, Greg, in that you've surrounded yourself with people who do consider kindness and
Not all of them. I have people around me that are, you know, and they're interesting, and I ask questions. Okay, well, why are these people still in my world? What am I asking for from them? And the best thing that I've got is something that falls in line with what Abraham Hicks talks about in the contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that without the contrast, how is it that we know what we'd like to have? How is it that we know what we would like to create if we don't have that contrast?
Oh, well, I turn on the nightly news for that.
I don't do that.
That's as close as I want it to get to me.
Oh my
That's
God.
coming into my world way too close. I don't want it in my. Matter of fact, when we get done here, I got a mountain bike movie, mountain biking through the Alps, that I get to watch here. That's what I'm.
Oh my
Create some
God.
inspiration. So I want you guys to think about this from the standpoint of, with these stories that we're choosing, you know, what kind of contribution does that now have upon our relationship with our bodies, with the relationships with the people around us, with the relationship with what we're creating. And what I have seen over 12 some odd years now of being a trainer and dealing firsthand with people at a moment of slight moment of vulnerability there, where they come to me and say, look, I've got this problem I'd like to solve. And what I keep finding that it comes back to, and not only my experience with them, but the experience that I've read from many other people now that are leading this front of moving into more of a mindfulness approach to things, not only our lives, but our fitness, our time in the kitchen, our overall movement and wellness that we set up, and how these stories and how we choose to deal with them, whether we choose to to fully let them be expressed, or we suppress them, or we choose other ones that really aren't ours in the first place, or we just ride along with the ones that were chosen for us. And what I've come to find out is that so much of that energy, so much of that stress becomes, it has an effect on the body. The body now resonates with that. And we begin to have issues with disease. We begin to have issues with weight gain. And these things may not be what is naturally ours, but they're happening because the body is saying, hey, this energy, this stress of this story that is not really yours, because either you haven't completely bought into the idea that this is going to be my story and made peace with it, or you're just running along on autopilot here and doing the story and shoving down the ones that would actually bring you great joy in your life, the stories that actually are your bliss, the things that you can't not do, and you're not doing them. You think about them in those quiet places where you don't think anybody else is watching, and you allow yourself to have that moment of like, wow, wouldn't it be so great? Oh, wouldn't it be so great if I did this? Oh, wait, I can't do that. No, I couldn't do that because that would be too scary. Oh, man, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't go up to that girl and ask her to dance. No, I couldn't do that. That would be too scary. The one in high school, that was mine. And,
Oh boy. Was she a cheerleader, Greg?
no, I was a cheerleader in college, though. And that's a whole other story. Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it definitely contributed to me. And I had a good time, man. But it's like that fear of having the courage to go ahead and step into doing something that you know is yours, that you know would bring you an amazing feeling. It's like when I sit back a few years ago and think about this moment and how scared I would have been to do this. And to have that, the courage to step in and just go, you know what, I'm going to do this. I was thinking about this kind of stuff 25 years ago. I would have these lucid moments on these walks that I would have, and I would hear myself, I would see myself talking all of this. I mean, this stuff was just coming through me that I had no understanding of, really. But it sounded really profound and really cool. And I saw myself talking to all these people about it, and they were digging it and everything. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I would get done with that moment, and then everything would come crashing in, all the judgment, the doubt, and everything. Oh, wait a minute, I'm just a drummer. Everybody else has always been doing it. There's guys like Tony Robbins and all these other cats. They got this handle. They don't need me. I don't need to do that. No. Nobody wants to hear me. What would have happened if I had stepped into that back then?
I don't know. You wouldn't be who you are today.
No, I wouldn't.
Exactly.
And you're pretty awesome today.
Well, let me ask you guys this. What would have happened if I never stepped into doing this? What if I had never got the courage to put my book out, to go ahead and say, you know what, I don't care what people think about this book. I'm putting it out anyway.
Well, probably 10 years down the road, you'd be going, gosh, I wonder what would have happened if I ever put that book out. The shoulda, woulda, couldas,
The regret.
Yeah, the regrets. And it's not that I want to look back on my life and regret anything. I think that those are stories too. And I look at all of it and go, nope, it contributed to where I am now. There were things, obviously I felt like I needed to go through somewhere or another to get to this place, to build this spot. So real quickly here, I want to ask you guys, what do you think happens when you let go of those stories? The ones that may not be serving you, or the ones that you've been running along with? And, in talking to all of you, it seems like to some extent or another, you're not really afraid to let go of the stories that aren't working. But
well, but we're also all a little more mature than we were in high school.
Yeah, that's the big difference.
But we also typically don't share those things that we have difficulty getting rid of. For example, it's taken me quite some time, the thought of coming out with my program and coming out with my cancer story,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize would be so hard, because back in the 80s when I first had cancer, it was the big C. Nobody talked about it. And so
Yeah.
learning to talk about it without reliving it every time I talked about it has been
That's hard.
extremely difficult for me.
Hard. Yeah.
And now it's normal for people to talk about those things, but it's still those old tapes. I've had trouble getting rid of those old thoughts of nobody can know, I have to keep it a big secret, and you know, and now you don't have to, and changing those tapes out in my head and getting rid of that association has been very difficult. But I think I'm almost there.
Well, you got your
think you
program,
got
huh?
there,
From my
I
friends.
think you got there. You got there. When I talk to you, just the coming from you, it's like amazing. You're just so awesome.
Oh, thank you. But see, I get there with friends like you and you and you and you. You know, I mean, that's how we get there. Is okay. Well, I respect this person, and they're not looking at me like I've just fallen off a truck and hit my head. You know. Okay. You know.
Oh,
Maybe I can do it again.
oh.
Hey, Becky, you got an experience of what it was feeling like to let go of an old story?
Oh, goodness.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
great.
I'm sure I do. No, I'm sure I do. Nothing's popping into my mind at the moment.
It was a good one, Becky.
That's over.
Uh-oh.
I know the story. You know, I'll share one with you guys if you want, because this
Yeah, come on, Greg.
this one was kind of interesting, and you guys I'll see what you think about the approach that I took to this thing, because on the surface it seems like something that's really, really silly to do, but about 2 years ago I sold my drum kit. I just said, you know what, I'm getting it out of here. It used to sit in the corner over here all stacked up, and I saw it every day, and it kept reminding me of being a musician, get out there on stage and play rock and roll and all that other stuff. And the story that I had all along, that I've had since I was 8 years old, the story of being that rock musician, that rock star. And what I felt that was happening is that I wasn't going to go look for a band to play with, because I didn't want to put the time and the effort in to get back to the level that I had been at. So what was I doing with that story that was stuck in there? It was holding me back from moving forward. And I chose to go ahead and sell the kit. I chose to go ahead and say, you know what? For the time being, the rock star story is done. I'm gonna let it go. And it was it was a little interesting. It was new. It was like, I mean, how do you let go of a 35-year-old story or more, a 45-year-old story, and move on from that? And it just it freed me up to create this. It freed me up, my mind, all the time that I was spending thinking about creating that again. I put that into creating all of this, and I was able to move forward with this. It was pretty much about a year later, the book was out, and here we go. So that's what happened when I let go of an old story.
Well,
But Greg, why did you also do for something for me that's so powerful that you loved so much? Is I don't know. I mean, was there a reason why you had to let that go? Why can't you keep it for a little while longer, or till a point where maybe
Because I wasn't creating
I
from
don't need it anymore? But
I wasn't creating from it.
you're still.
It was holding me back. The
Greg,
story.
I think the ladies here are really finding it hard to let your story go.
Hey, you know what, guys?
you
You
need a
I would hold on to
lighter.
that.
You're a rock star, honey.
can look at it this way. I'm gonna
You're a rock star.
I'm gonna be a rock star this way.
And
So- and that's fine. I don't regret the choice. I don't regret walking away from it. The thing that I see now is it gave space for it to come back to me at some point in another form.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer was the slave to that story. Always having to look at my life as I need to look at this in preparation for this. I need to consider everything else in my life in order for it to support that story, which didn't make any sense anymore. I have a child. I'm not going to go out on the road in a van with 3 other guys. I mean, it's not happening. I'm not doing it. 49 years old. We're not traveling in the United States in a van with, and doing that. That's, what I do when I was in my 20s. And it was fun. And I had a great time with it. And
Okay, I didn't know that part.
there was like I said, there was a space. There was a space I was just not going to go to. I wasn't going to take the time to get back to that level of where I'd gotten to, which it was an impossibility for me to get there. I mean, I know I have a choice, but it would mean that I would have to choose myself out of stories that I had written, and one of them is my beautiful little daughter and the time I get to spend with her.
That's so.
That's
I just
awesome.
think that's
awesome,
precious.
Greg.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Greg.
You guys, I gotta hop off because I have to go. I work graveyard shifts, and I gotta go to a work meeting before I start my shift. So I'm gonna have.
Thanks, Becky. I'm gonna shut this down anyway. So.
Okay, but I do want to say thank you, everybody, for your contribution and stuff. It was great spending this space with you. And I want to say this last thing that you just said, Greg. Even though I heard you tell that story before, it really clicked into me right now. Like, what stories and where am I being limited that I've been holding on to that might serve me to let go altogether or even temporarily to make room for something else. And so, actually, I really, really like that. That inspired me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, Patty.
All
Love
right.
you, Patty. Bye.
See you, Becky.
Bye.
All right, so you guys, I think I want to wind this thing down, so I want to tell you about a few things, if that's okay.
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 So you guys all know I have this book. It's called Follow Your Bliss, A Guide to a Powerful Mindset. And you imagine, geez, Tammy, I know you have one. Patty, did I give you one? Did I send you one? Okay.
I got one of your books.
Ellie, I don't know if I got you one or not.
Yeah,
I know that
I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it at the October conference.
Oh, okay. So we got that. So if you guys know anybody that'd be interested in anything like that, if you guys want to pick one up again or something like that, or you got somebody that might be interested in, if they get a hold of me, tell me you learn about it here. They're $15. I'll ship it to them from me. You don't have to buy it from Amazon or anything like that. It's just $15 instead of the $20 that I normally charge. So yeah, I got that. What else did I want to tell you guys? Sorry, I wrote down a bunch of stuff, or a couple things here. So this whole thing was leading into the next 6 weeks to Bliss class that I've been running. And both the girls that are in the middle of it right now have left, so they can't even tell you what their experience is.
Uh-oh.
You're going to have to take my word for it. I think they're having fun with it, but they're in my third round of this thing. I did the first one back in the beginning of summer, and it was fun. I had some luck with it, and I have a second one that just finished last week, and they had an awful lot of breakthroughs with stuff too, which was really fun to see. And this particular go around, it's even stronger than it's been yet because they just keep building on each other. And so what it is, it's I took the book, I created a workbook based upon it. It's got 5 modules in it. And let me see if I remember all the modules. The first one is this one. It's the stories that we tell ourselves. And we take 2 weeks to go through that. Just because I think that's a much deeper little subject. We probably spend the whole year talking about that one. But we'll do it in 2 weeks, just to kind of prime people open for it. It's a lot more in depth than what we're doing right now. And then the next module we get into food. So we spend a week talking about my perspective on food and everything, which is it's not a diet thing. I'm not really a big fan of diets. I like to just explain what food is, and then look at it from the standpoint of what's the contribution that this food's going to be for me, and how is it going to support me in my following my bliss. The next module is on movement, and we talk about just, can I get out of the gym? Can I get off of running on the street? Can I do something else? And let's find the thing that is right for you and how to build a plan around that. The next module, we get into the consciousness part of that, and we start talking about the meditation part about it with gratitudes and visualization, and how powerful these tools can be to help set up the environment to follow your bliss. And then I followed up the 5th week, or 6th week. The 5th module is just putting this whole thing together and creating, a plan based upon all of this. And how would that work in your life and your lifestyle? And how does it support all of this? And, what do we do with things like plateaus and slide backs or whatever else that you want to see there that just we tend to want to make wrongness of ourselves about, and, what that may be contributing or not contributing to the whole process. So I'm starting this class. This one's going to be September 11th. It's a Monday night, 7 p.m., and it'll run, the next 6 weeks after that, so into October. With this class, I have the 6 weekly group classes. They'll be recorded and available to listen to afterwards. I have 2 private one-on-one sessions as part of this whole thing, so you get a hold of me and, hey, Greg, I want to talk about these things that I don't really want to talk about in the middle of the group, but I want to talk about anyway. You get the book, of course. You get the workbook, the guided meditations that I've done, the visualizations that I've done for you, and yeah. And what I've been doing is this class is $595, and if we do this in the next 24 hours, if any of you are interested, or if you got somebody that you think might be interested, if they get a hold of me in the next 24 hours, I'm going to knock $200 off that, and we'll do it for $395. How about that? There you go.
Awesome.
Now you got an idea. So those of you that are listening to this at another time, same thing. Get a hold of me in the next 24 hours. So anyway, thank you guys for your contribution tonight. I appreciate it.
That was awesome, Greg. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, Greg was great.
So I am going to end the recording here. Thank you guys for joining me tonight, and I'll talk to you next time.